What's up, guys? Welcome to Dad Talk today. Hope you are enjoying your weekend. I've been sitting here watching these headlines, and when I was looking at this earlier today, I said, I'm just going to go on and do an impromptu episode. Maybe I could have promoted this and waited for more people to join in, but we're going to go ahead and do it. We're going to talk about the subject of domestic violence and how it happens equally to men. That is such a controversial subject. And I'll tell you now, even though that we're talking about it, it's going to be these guys just hate moms. They're making it a gender issue, the whole 9 yards. And you know what that is? That is the cancel culture trying to tell you to shut up. I think there is something that has really been bringing light to this as of lately, and it's the Johnny Depp case. And there is a part of that that makes me pissed off and makes me excited at the same time. The reason I'm pissed off about it is this has been happening for decades to millions of men, and people have been trying to get awareness about it. And now a celebrity is going through it, so now everybody's talking about it, right? But at the same time, I'm glad that it's actually out there. And when we're talking about this particular case, man, you are talking about textbook domestic violence, intimidation, gaslighting, the whole 9 yards. When it comes to domestic violence and talking about men, it's just not a subject that is PC. Nobody really cares, right? But I know from the thousands of men that we've heard from, the fathers on this page, and just out in the general public, that this is a real problem. And so, guys, if you are here today and you're listening to this, one of the things they do is try to silence your voice when you're talking about this. I'd love to see you down in the comments. Tell us a little bit about what you're going through or what you've been through. And if you got any thoughts and comments on this, put it down there. We'll read it on the show and we'll talk about it together. Yes. So what creates this phenomenon? Why are men canceled? How much money is behind it? There are so many different layers. When we're talking about this family court, gender bias stuff, one of the very first things people will say is there is no bias. Yeah, right. Okay, let's cut the crap. There is a very huge bias. You never see a man on a billboard. You never see men's shelters. They're never even mentioned. And there's a lot behind that. When we talk about the subject of VAWA, that is something that I am looking more and more into, and it's so complex. It's kind of hard to kind of navigate this thing. We're talking about billions of dollars that's been put in funding for these domestic violence organizations to keep it this way. There is something, it's in the training. I think we've talked about this on the show a couple of times. This is what is known as the Duluth Model. This is the domestic violence wheel, the power and control wheel. Using coercion and threats, making or carrying out threats to do something to hurt her, threatening to leave her, to commit suicide, to report her to welfare, making her drop charges, making her do illegal things, using male privilege, treating her like a servant, making all the big decisions, acting like the master of the castle, being the one to define men and women's roles. You know, the sad thing about this, a lot that goes attached to that model says about 90% of the time, the man is going to be the perpetrator. He is going to use this male privilege. He's going to use who he is as a father, as a man, to take control of it. And I tell you, this is a big load of bullcrap. Because as many of these men that are facing this situation right now, when they go to speak, there's always somebody that tries to cancel them or doesn't listen to them. The Amber and Johnny Depp case. You know, it was a big deal when they thought it was him hitting her, right? He lost his job, he lost everything. But when those recordings came out, you know, nobody's going to believe you, Johnny. You're a man. It kind of did fizzle away. It's getting back in the headlines and everything right now. But guys, you got to start speaking up about this and these situations that are going on. Let me get back over here to the comments. But anyway, guys, it is a very real thing. And if you've ever been through it, it's like hell on earth. I've seen many of these instances, and I believe this is attached to VAWA, that he might be getting hit. Say he calls the cops and says, hey, I've been hit. I need you to come do something. Most of the time, they will show up. Guess who's going to jail? He is. With this VAWA, there is also something known as mandatory arrest. As long as there is an allegation, we've got to arrest. That's a part of the law, and it's definitely making this worse and worse. I think one of the inspirations behind me wanting to talk about this is some of the things that we do behind the scenes that not many people know about. I talked a little bit about it on the page earlier. But I'm going to talk to you guys about it now. And for any other ones that were a part of this, I mean, no disrespect, but I got to say my part in this, right? It's a couple of months ago, I started talking to like a national fatherhood program. They had a local chapter and they wanted to get with me. They invited me out to lunch. Went on for about 2 hours. Eric, tell us everything, what you think is wrong with the system and what's going on. So, dude, we went down the rabbit hole from CPS to Title 4D to equal shared parenting, the whole 9 yards. We went down the rabbit hole. And it was like, man, I had no idea that a lot of this existed. And think about this national fatherhood program. And a lot of this wasn't being addressed. You see constantly on the news and with many of these organizations and the media talking about the fatherless issue. It's became the popular thing, right? We're going to talk about the fatherless issue. Rarely do you see them talking about the family courts, the domestic violence industry, and some of the things that are causing it. But regardless, I thought this was really cool. I'm finally going to get to talk to somebody. It sounds like they're listening. Maybe we can get something going. I was invited to a program not far from where I live, in the state of Georgia, and I think many other states. If you are an unmarried father, you got to go through the legitimation process. If you wasn't married, your child is illegitimate. So you have to go legitimate, you got to take the paternity test, and you got to get on child support. Now, none of this gives you any rights to your child. All it says is that you are the father and you're going to pay child support. After that, you got to go to court. And then you got to establish your rights. Yeah. Talk about the fatherless issue, but you don't want to make it easy for these guys to be dad. Anyway, I go down there and I go to check this out. 8 o'clock in the morning on a Friday, 2 fathers showed up, was out of work so they could go do this. They're a little confused. They're sitting here filling out this paperwork. They're told that if they go and do this, maybe they will get every other weekend. No judge is going to want to rip a child out of a mother's arms. It's okay if we do that from a dad, but no judge is going to want to do that. Maybe you'll get every other weekend. I'm sitting here watching this process, right? And then afterwards, they show them how to go start this, sign themselves up for child support, give it to the court. After that, you still got to go do this. And I don't know about you guys. There are some guys that really pulled this pro se thing off. But when it comes to the law and how complex it is, a lot of it doesn't make sense. Just like a lot of the math they teach you in high school that you never use in your life, it doesn't make sense. But if you don't do the process right, you could have a great case. But if you don't file it right, you're going to be in a bad predicament. So anyway, after this is done, they tell them, even if you do this paperwork, if you end up getting an attorney later, it doesn't matter because they got their own papers. But here is 2 pieces of paper. This is how you go get custody after you sign yourself up for this. So on the outside, looks good, right? Looks great. They're helping people do this for free. My first thoughts is you got to look deeper. Once you start seeing what's going on in this community and you know how these government programs come in and sneak themselves in to make us look like, oh, look what we're doing for fatherhood. Look what we're doing for parenting. Isn't this so great? We're helping these guys that wouldn't be able to afford this. They get you established on child support. Government funded. And then after that, here's your 2 pieces of papers. Go figure it out on your own. Anybody that's ever been through a family court battle, if you're watching this right now, tell me if I'm a liar. These guys that think they're going to take those 2 pieces of paper in there, if they go up against a seasoned attorney, the ex gets an attorney, goes to court with them, they are going to wipe the floor with them in court. I look at it as these guys are headed to a dead end. But I stayed quiet. It's like, I want to look into this a little bit further. Was then invited to a back room. Guy starts telling me all his credentials. Anyway, they were about to be doing a segment on domestic violence. Going to be having a meeting. And that was at the point in time I kind of wanted to know who I was talking to. So let me ask you a question. How do you distinguish between real domestic violence and false allegations of domestic violence? First thing, typical reply, well, I've been doing this for years. When you know, you know. I was like, no, I just want to ask. How do you distinguish between the two? The answer was, well, when she comes down and she's got her head down, or maybe she seems nervous, maybe she's got bruises on her, she's acting like she doesn't want to talk, she's trembling. You can just see how she feels. Stuck my hand up, said, look, no disrespect, but you're already explaining domestic violence to me through the woman's eyes and that she is the victim. You know that domestic violence happens equally to men. You know what, guys? After all this work, all these conversations, and texting, calling me every day at that moment in time, conversation was over. I haven't heard anything back since. Now, I could have sat there, played the part. Maybe there would have been some resources from it or whatever. But it's at that time that you got to speak your truth. You got to speak the truth, and you got to know what you're standing for. We don't do this show just for the fun of it or to make a career out of it. Because I'm going to tell you, doing stuff in the family law arena, if you're not an attorney, you're not an expert, this isn't the place to do it. And I wanted to make sure that I knew what this was and who I was talking to. But that became offensive because I said, you know, it happens equally as much to men. Well, how does it feel for men to hear this? How does it feel when they are saying this on the other side? It was not good for me to say it, but it's okay for everybody else. And that is kind of a perfect portrayal of how men have been treated with this whole domestic violence thing. They are just not looked at as a victim. They're not. Bothers me, man. It really does bother me. You know, I think a lot in this community. I was just having a talk with a friend. I see him down there in the comments yesterday. I think we've had so much focus on equal shared parenting, parental alienation, education, and thinking that if we get this legislation changed, if we get this 50-50 changed, that it should be over, right? Guys, I thought that for a couple of years. I really did. And I still think it needs to be done. Don't get me wrong. But just because we get this legislation changed, I want you to understand this billion-dollar industry, it does not make the game go away. They just change how the game is played. You understand? Unbeknownst to me, I was talking to a guy not long ago, very, very knowledgeable on this subject. It was the Bob Lewis who wrote The Feminist Lie. And he said, Eric, you knew they got 50-50 passed in Colorado once upon a time, but a VAWA-funded organization came back later on, got it repealed. This is a reality that's not being spoke about, and I think it needs to. And I'm going to tell you, this gets dangerous. When you start talking about this type of money, this type of industry, and you start bringing awareness to it, I want you to look at Mark Angelucci. What happened to him? Nancy Schaefer. There's some of these topics that's meant, put that over here. We do not want you to touch it. But that is something we definitely need to start being aware of, guys. You know what? I know what it's like to experience that. Don't talk much about my personal story. I don't even want to do it now, but I want to talk to you guys, okay? People will say, you do not lay hands on a woman. I agree. You don't lay hands on a woman. You also do not lay hands on a man. I don't care if it's a woman. Sometimes it could even be a child. But let one of them slap you in the face. Let one of them punch you. Let one of them throw something at you. What's the first thing? Your adrenaline, your testosterone starts going. You want to retaliate. And many times that is exactly what they want you to do. It's exactly. And then if you don't, that's when the nagging and the mocking you. Oh my God, you're just running away. You're scared. You won't stay and work things out. Did you guys hear this from Amber? When I was listening to this, you know what? Johnny might have had his problems in that too, but I am sitting there listening to one of the most toxic people. He's like, you threw a vodka bottle at me. You sliced my finger. I walked to the other room to get away from it. How are we going to fix our problems if you just keep walking away? Man up. You need to fight. That's what they do. And you know, the saddest thing about this is that the laws protect it. They 100% protect it, guys. And you guys know they do. Right now would be a good time to start talking about this. And so I've gotten so much criticism in this movement for years, ever since I started doing this. Oh, he talks to celebrities all the time. This is why. We've been talking about this for decades. Now it happens to one, and it's out there. So again, there's a part of me that pisses me off, but there's also that part, it's like, finally, somebody is talking about it, right? And you'll have to excuse me if I haven't done it sooner. I know a lot of times when these big events come on, everybody wants to talk about it. They want to ride the current trend train. But there was a lot of stuff Listening to this case, listening to her mock him, that puts me back in that space. It just makes my whole body shiver, makes the hair on your arm stand up. I know what it's like to experience that. Hell on earth, man. Feels like you're walking on eggshells. 100%. You'll have to excuse me. A lot of times when I do these live, I have so many things planned that I want to talk about, but you get in the heat of the moment and you start forgetting. So as we go throughout this podcast, I'm going to read some of these comments, okay? And then we're going to discuss them. And if you guys want to talk about anything, man, put it down there. Let's do it. But I want to hear from some of my guys that have experienced this. And here's the thing. Do not be afraid to talk. I put it this way, even when I was in that office, again, I could have sat there, I could have shut up, I could have played the part. Maybe it would have went somewhere. But no, I refuse to sit there and listen to this narrative. And you know what? That's a narrative that's been used for so long. I don't really hold it against the people, even though I don't really, because that's what they've been taught to do. Masculinity has been attacked at every corner. You know, at once upon a time, I've talked about this years ago. I don't know if any of you have heard it, so we're going to bring it up. Harvard did a study on domestic violence. You know what their findings were? That it happened equally just as much to men. It also came out that the highest rate of domestic violence in the United States of America were from lesbian couples. Crazy thing about that, guys, a few days later, that study got deleted. Why do you think that is? Talking about this VAWA stuff, if you guys paid attention to what Ron DeSantis did down there in Florida, I don't know what political party you're affiliated with, but he did something that was amazing. There was one of those domestic violence organizations down there that was getting millions of dollars in funding. At one point in time, got more vacation time than there is days in the year. And he found this, started digging into it. $5 million he got back from this organization that was supposedly there for domestic violence. But that's just one. There are so many of these things. I want you guys to educate yourself on some stuff. Again, big rabbit hole. So it might take you some time. Do a simple Google search and look up VAWA grants. I want you to go see how much money there is behind this domestic violence industry given through that Violence Against Women's Act. That was made back in the 90s. Senator Joe Biden, now the president. And every year it receives millions and millions of dollars in funding. Read the descriptions, what it's for. Now, if you buck back, they'll be quick to say, oh, this covers men too. Well, why doesn't it say men? Why is it labeled how it is? Well, man, that's not such a big deal. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. When you see the portrayal of fathers on TV, how he's a bumbling idiot, he's a deadbeat, he's dead. Does that matter? Yes, it does, because it has desensitized everybody to the importance of fathers, to the importance of being a man. Your masculinity, your importance is being attacked. Yes, it does matter. Call it out. Do your studies on it. I'll give you something. I'll give you something even more. When I tell you to look this up, and I said through Google, go to DuckDuckGo or one of the other search engines and then look up VAWA. Watch how different the results become. When I very first started looking this up, all I saw was pro-VAWA stuff. I go over to DuckDuckGo, do the same exact search, and then I started getting the real meat and potatoes. There are so many roadblocks when it comes to talking about this stuff. So many roadblocks. But if you do the search, you do the research, you'll find it. Anyway, so I was going to get to some of these comments. So that's what I'm going to do now. Sorry if I talk too much. Carl Martinez said, I was abused, but I was in denial. And I'm glad that we need to have this discussion. I was not only abused by my ex-wife, she verbally, mentally, and psychologically abused by her. She destroyed my career to control me, then left me because I wasn't rich enough. Then I was abused by the judge, who is the biggest jerk I've ever witnessed, and he has no business being a judge. So many people reach out saying, man, you got to hear my story. It is one of the craziest stories. People need to hear my story. And they have no idea just how similar almost each one of us guys' stories are. Sometimes the details can be mixed around. But after I read this comment, how many of you relate to what was just said here? Yep. Heather Cordova said, men need to speak out. We need to build our fathers up. They can have the confidence to tell. There needs to be a safe spot. If there's one thing that this Will Smith and Johnny Depp situation has done, okay, is it really have, and I used to hate hearing this word. I used to hate it, but it is so fitting in this situation. It has really showed the simps that we have in this world. That when these guys start speaking up about the struggles that they're going through, that they're just whining. Man, you need to man up. Are you really going to sit here and whine? Pick up your man panties and just get on. It's not that big of a deal. More men attack other men because they have been programmed to do that as well. Let's be honest. Many times hoping to win over the attention of a female. Virtue signaling. I'm taking up for you. You should appreciate me because I'm doing this. Stop the crap, man. You need to take a long, hard look in the mirror. Put yourself in that person's shoes. Listen to what they're saying and say, what if I was going through this? Rarely do we see people doing this. And now you got the people on the internet that think they can just comment anything because they don't have to face you face to face. They can say anything they want to about you. That's something Mike Tyson talked about, over the past couple of years. We see how that happened when somebody did it face to face with him a few days ago, right? I'm going to tell you, I made that meme yesterday. I've done a lot of stupid things in my life, but picking a fight with Mike Tyson on an airplane is not something I'm ever going to do. But that's the difference in between what this simp population, what society has done with these guys on the internet. The amount of comments we get every single day. Moms too. You just hate women. Or like you're not looking at anything that's happened to them. That is totally false. We understand that domestic violence happens to women too. I understand that they go through some of these situations when it comes to family court. But that doesn't excuse the bias. For anybody that wants to talk about equality and does not talk about this bias, when we talk about family court or domestic violence, I really question your motives. You're not helping. PC doesn't get us anywhere. 82.5% of the time, he's going to end up without custody. It's happening equally on the other side, but it's not a bias issue. Eric, you can't say that. You can't talk about dads. The hell I'm not. That's how we've got here in the first place. People are passive and they think, oh, maybe it'll just fix itself. Maybe there's going to be some superhero that's going to come along and fix it. No, change begins with you guys and not being silent. And we've got to stop with the whole simp thing, man. You're tearing down guys. Suicide, 7 times higher in men than in women. Why is that? Think of that pride, everything that gets broken down. Just stop, man. Glenn Svoboda said, destruction of the family unit, we had enough. That is absolutely what it is. I believe there was a plan early on to destroy that nuclear family. And how do you do that? How do you take away those traditional family values and break apart that family unit? How do you control a nation? You take that dad out of the home. That was the number one target. I take the black family, for instance. The black family was one of the tightest structures in the world. Then all these incentives started coming in to where we will incentivize you if you get the dad out of the home. It's near an 80% fatherlessness in the black community, guys. I've seen some anywhere from like 73 up to 79, but it's somewhere out of 4 out of 5 kids in that community are fatherless childs. And how did it get there? Why did they do it? It's in every community that's out there, but masculinity is being attacked every single day. The most toxic thing when we're talking about masculinity isn't guys and toxic masculinity. It's how society has made masculinity toxic. Anything to do with being a man is wrong. 100%. It's being taught to our kids at school. It's in the politics. It's in the family courts. It's a little bit of everywhere. It's on the TV. Are you guys paying attention to some of these questions that they've been asking these kids at school? I was reading one of the math questions the other day that, like, a single mother has to do this, and, she's having to take care of her kid on her own. Who is the one that abandoned her? It was like the boyfriend, or it had like all these multiple choices. And like, which man was the perpetrator here? And it was a math question. And I'm looking at it and it's like, you've got to be freaking kidding me. I'm not surprised. But how is people not paying attention to this? This is what's being taught to kids in school. That's what they're seeing on TV. I'm hoping this case actually starts to wake some people up, because I do believe the cancel culture is getting some pushback right now. Not enough, but it's coming. Benjamin Crowley said, I'm going through a hard situation, guys, but it's always satisfying to watch the podcast. Hey, man, thank you. Thank you. Eugene Nelson said, thank you for talking about this issue. Guys, come on, be a part of the conversation. I want to hear from you guys. Cindy Slavin said, yep, typically a call of domestic violence, the man goes to jail. Ask the police, why is that? If the female was instigator, they react accordingly. Typically the male goes to jail. Now, I've talked to a few cops about this, and they've even told me there is times where we get to the house and we can tell you 100% that man is innocent. But we have to take him in just in case there was any shred of truth. I guess like accountability reasons, right? No judgment in it. But again, why couldn't you take her? If he's saying that was the one that beat him, why is he going to be the one to go? Bow wow. Jason Burmender said, yeah, man, that trial brings back some horrible memories from me, but glad Johnny is exposing some of this. I am too. I really am, man. And when you guys see these situations, when you hear these recordings, how many bells is it ringing off when you're saying, ooh, I've been there. That deja vu is kicking in. It's crazy. Running Shoes US said, she was disrupting my kid's care. I was a care environment, nothing to do with me. She fractured my skull. Cops did nothing. All I ever heard was, your face don't look that bad. I take it back to the recordings, man. Come on, Johnny, you're a man. Nobody's going to believe you. I didn't hurt you. I wasn't punching you. I hit you. How absolutely ridiculous are statements like that? How does something like that even have to go to trial? That recording should have been enough to say, okay, we've got what we need here. But it's the United States. Benjamin Crowley said, how can we, when we are supposed to suck it up and we lose trust completely? I think that is a very real situation where you're seeing a lot of these men, they have fought for years and they just give up. They give up, and that's the guy that's going to be considered the deadbeat. Real deadbeat is somebody that is not going to try. He's not going to talk about it. He's going to be gone. Doesn't want to talk to his kids, nothing at all. But when a guy goes and spends every dime that he's got, faces these allegations of domestic violence in the whole 9 yards, and still doesn't get his kid, he's considered a deadbeat. It's the narratives. And that's why it is important, again, like when I was talking about that conversation I had, when I hear, when she's doing this or when she's doing that, no. Don't bring that narrative to me. I don't want to hear it. You're going to talk about it. Talk about it the way it needs to be. Right? That's what happens when you run from the narrative. Sapper on YouTube said, my ex-wife is a prime example of non-reciprocal DV. I never touched her, but she sure as blank did. She punched, kicked, bite. Other once I went to sleep. I had one night's full sleep in 5 years. That's hell on earth, man. I couldn't imagine that. I tell you, there was one of these situations that happened in this case that I haven't heard before, and I'm not surprised about it, but it was pretty out there. If any of you guys have experienced this, I'd love to hear it. But could you imagine the case getting so bad, the toxicity going off the charts to the point that somebody would squeeze a turd on your bed? Put a turd on your bed, put the cover over it. They're hoping for you to get in. What a surprise that would be, right? I know this stuff sounds crazy. You know why? It's crazy. It gets crazy. It gets nuts. It really does. Let me get back to some of these. Eugene Nelson said, my ex lied and said that I hit her and that I was a violent person and I've never been in a fight since I was 13 years old. And the court gave her my kids and now she still keeps the kids away from me. That's the problem that this does, right? Doesn't have to be any proof to it. That was, again, why I asked the question. Can you tell me the difference in domestic violence and false allegations? Because in my experience, from what I've seen, false allegations are just as effective as the actual event occurring. And if you can prove it was a false allegation, what happens to the accuser? Nothing. Nothing. Now think about that. You can make this allegation that can completely ruin somebody's life, but nothing. I want to be perfectly clear too. I think sometimes people think when you're talking about these situations that you just somehow got skin in the game. I never went through those false abuse or false molestation or any of those types of allegations. I never experienced that. Of course, I had lies spread on me from anywhere from, I ain't even going to get into all that, man, but I've had several that were out there. But I started seeing where the problem was. And I so empathize with you guys because I cannot imagine what it would be like to be accused of such a thing. That is an evil person. It takes an evil person to be able to say that about another human being and take that part of your life. I mean, because let's be honest, once you go through something like that, your life is never going to be the same. That narrative is there. People are going to believe her. And no matter, even if you prove your innocence, you're still going to have that stigma against you. Sometimes it gets worse. Look at John Mast. Lost his life. I want to talk about him for a second because there was many things in that case. If you guys haven't seen the documentary, I got it pinned to the top of the Facebook on Dad Talk Today. I've got it on YouTube. It's 100% free to watch. But as I started digging into that case and making that documentary, the pieces of the puzzle start coming together because one of the reasons I don't get to message back and forth with people as much as I'd like to is because people's cases are so complex. There's so much going on. Nobody can tell you their case in 10 or 15 minutes. It's usually going to be hours and hours. So here I am months after John was killed, getting all these details, putting it together. And it took me about 6 months to finally get that storyline the way it happened. And that was with John's help because he had made a timeline where we could go in there and see this is when this happened. This is when this happened. But John's case, married again for years, never been any allegations. One night, out to supper, all of a sudden, accused of hitting her at a restaurant. John goes, gets the tape at the restaurant. That way there was no he said, she said. Judge, just look at it for yourself. They're saying it occurred here. Here's the tape. Watch it. Judge allegedly said, we don't have anything to watch that with, so we're not allowing it in here. How do you not allow evidence in court, especially when you're being accused of assaulting somebody and it carries major consequences? So there's the other part of that too, right? Felt like nobody believed him. What did he do? He went ahead and pled guilty to get that lesser sentence. Trial goes back to court. That went from civil court. And when it goes to family court, he gets a new judge on the case that says, I want to see that tape. They watch the tape. Judge says, you know what? You didn't do any of the things that you were accused of. And quite frankly, it brings everything else that you've accused him of into question. He was exonerated. But here was a man with the evidence, wasn't allowed to give it, pled guilty, had to go years, spend thousands of money in lawyers, all these court days, take off from work, to finally get somebody to look at it and say, you know what? You were telling the truth in the first place. But that's how they do it, right? If you don't go ahead and plead out to it, this is what you're going to get. Versus if you just go ahead and say, I did it. And that's how the prosecution system works. And it's absolutely disgusting. Disgusting. I would like to see this system crumble to the ground. There are some of these cases that are going to need to be heard, and we need to rebuild that system for those to be heard. But for the most part, this system needs to be completely revamped. It has failed on so many levels. All right. I'm going to... Udi Gannon said, mental and emotional abuse hurts more than physical abuse. Thank you for talking about this. Yes, it does. You know, typical for these guys when going through domestic violence to have somebody mocking their manhood, whether it's talking about your private, you're not stepping up, you're not a real man would do this, a real man would do that. Never ever taking into accountability. Maybe you should be doing this. But again, you got to open the door. You got to buy the ring. You got to do. We have been taught this is what you have to do. Happy wife, happy life. Happy spouse, happy house is not even in question. And it plays into this. And so if you don't go with what I want, this is what I'm going to do to you. And they know they got the upper hand, right? They know if I take this to court because of that bias, this is what I'm going to get. And that's how they can do it. And that can be very troubling, man. And as hard as it is for you guys, I mean, it's had to be bad for decades. But let's be real. Now you got social media. So it's not just them doing it in the house or, you know, in the kitchen or whatever, or talking to somebody at work. Now it becomes, I've got all these people, most of them probably don't even know, maybe bumped into them once or twice on social media, that I can give this story about this guy that are going to believe it without checking into it. Now you're defending yourself against people that don't even know who you are. They don't even make the effort to find out who you are. This is the story. Believe her. What happens? That physical or that mental abuse just gets worse and worse. What do a lot of guys do? They take back to social media to go give their part. What happens? They go to court and it's used against them. Those emotions come back and bite them in the rear end. I'm not saying this is the easiest thing to do, guys. And this isn't said to silence you. But if you find yourself going through that, hold it. You don't have to respond. You don't have to respond. There's places for you to come and talk about it. But make sure you're doing what you can to protect yourself from when you go there. Because everything you say and or do will be used against you. We know that from watching Cops, right? Anyway, Sapper said the Guardian ad litem we had assigned tried to claim that the definition of words didn't matter. Are you kidding me? You're a lawyer saying the terms don't matter. Dude, guys, please. I ain't getting on to you. I got a mouth on me too. Watch with the cousin. But you're all good. I hear you. And that's part of the emotions thing that I'm talking about. It's like, are you freaking kidding me, man? It is a jungle out there. Cindy Slavin said, if a female domestic violence victim goes to legal aid for representation, the man cannot and must hire a high-priced lawyer. Most can't afford. So they get screwed over again. Disgusting. So a lot of times it's what happens in court. I'd say most of the time. You're told you just need to go get an attorney. You just need to go get an expert. You just need to go take them to family court. That's all you got to do. Well, that's easy for somebody to tell somebody that doesn't have the funds to do that. And even if they can hire an attorney, now people will say this isn't real, but I want to educate my guys out there so you can arm yourself with the knowledge that you need. Many times it's been said you need to find out what attorney is putting money in that judge's pocket because you're going to get a little bit more kickback there. Do you guys know how to find that out? Followthemoney.org. If you go on followthemoney.org, you look at these judges, any politicians, you'll find out where those donations were coming from. So you better know kind of which way the motion in the ocean is going. But it's very true. There is a lot of that goes on. So if you don't get that person, or if you don't play that right, I've seen some of these guys that can have some of the best cases ever. But because of the judge or because of the attorney, again, look at Jonathan Vanderhagen, my buddy. Still talk to him every week. Takes his ex to court. Judge, you don't give me custody of my son. My son's going to die. 1.5 years old. Hydrocephalus, water on the brain. I don't think he's being taken care of. I think the mom's into things she shouldn't be. She's neglecting him. If you don't give me custody of my son's going to die. Not doing that. Not taking custody away from him. A few weeks later, baby boy dies. Here is a man that sat there, gave you the case, told you what was going to happen. You didn't listen. And now a little baby boy lost his life on it. I tell you what, man, there is a lot of blood on these people's hands. John Mast, Jonathan Vanderhagen. We see what happened with Chad Reed, Justin Goolsby. I mean, the whole past year, we've seen these guys that fought and fought and fought. And then when they finally start to get some type of custody, they show up and they're taken out. You know, the other sad thing about that is most of the people, I believe, that provide the motive behind it, no consequence. Have you guys seen the Chad Reed case? They're getting away with it. They're getting away with it. There's been no arrest. I don't think there's going to be. Oh, man. Eugene Nelson said, a lot of men are getting psychological abuse by women and the courts are backing them and the women knows it. Yep. Jason Vermender, one of the problems we have about speaking out is our exes will use whatever we say or do against us. For example, if I say my ex was suicidal, that will be turned around to me being a bitter ex trying to take the kids away. And yet she was suicidal during our relationship, and I have been so afraid to say such things and have had to learn a completely new way to communicate in case even this post shows up in court. That's right, guys. Go back. Thanksgiving 2020. Just a few months before John was killed, when I brought him on the show because I wanted people to hear what he was going through. We did not bring his video up. I didn't say his full name. We didn't mention names or anything. And I told John, if you do, it'll be used against you. I've seen it. I've seen many of the times that these guys start to speak. It is used against them. The other side of that, there is something that we put out there in case you're needing somebody to talk to. You're needing somebody to lean on, to vent. The Dad Talk Today support group, Robert Garza, a guy that is so smart on these issues, fought for 11 years, spent $600,000, fought 43 false CPS allegations, got his kids back. One of the best people I could ever tell you, man. That he runs that support group, and that is a closed group where we approve or disapprove everybody that comes into it, and we vet it. If you want to talk to people, and that's what that's there for. So make sure you utilize that, and it would be good to let other people know it's there. Because that's, some of the times, that's what these guys need more than anything is just somebody to vent to. Because for people that's never been through this, people tell you to go talk to family or go find a friend and talk to them about it. For people that's never been through this, they don't understand. They just do not understand. There's the other side of that too. Family gets equally as invested in this as you do. And so sometimes talking to them and their emotions getting in there just creates more emotions going on. But you got to have somebody to talk to. You really do. Jim Douglas said, I'm about to enter the family court here in Colorado, unfortunately. I'm about to have a son. And the mom has done everything she can to try to push me out. It's so sad that our son is going to be in the middle of his parents fighting over him because she doesn't want me to be in his life. She has been very verbally abusive to me, emotionally abusive, and I'm the bad guy in her and her family's eyes. Jim, I want you to check out something. It's called something different in every state. I wish I would have knew about this myself. There's something that's called the Responsible Fatherhood Registry, where if you go put that on, that's saying, I believe I am the father. So nobody's going to be able to adopt out that child or do away with your rights until your case has been heard because you have already claimed this I believe is my child. You'll have to go through the paternity test and everything else, but that is something that more men need to know about. And I'm pulling for you, buddy. I really am. Jamie Stewart said, why is it in the state of Missouri that men are 90% get charged for domestic violence? My solution came from a lady that told me if a woman calls on you for a domestic, tell the cops she hit you first, she goes to jail too. It's not really what I've seen. But you ask why 90% of the time, right? I don't know if you call it the beginning part of the show. Let's bring it back up. You guys need to look into this. The Power and Control Wheel, the Duluth Model, made in Duluth, Minnesota, which says about 90% of the time, he is going to be the perpetrator. He is going to use all this. This is what has been taught to family court judges and professionals for years and years and years. It's what was used to make VAWA, the Violence Against Women's Act, which then in return provides millions of dollars in funding to keep these situations this way. So why would it be going on in that state? I think if you do a little homework on that, you will find out. But as far as telling the cops first that she was the one that did it to you and then she's going to go to jail, I don't know about that. I really don't know about that. If that was true, I don't think we would be talking about it. Kevin Lalou, I think I said that. He said, Dad Talk today. Please talk more about women abusing men. It happens every day to people that don't get public attention. I hope Johnny Depp's story opens up the conversation about abusive men. Guys, we have been talking about this since we very first started. If you want to go back on Dad Talk Today, you can find it on YouTube. You can find it here on the Facebook. There was one of the shows that we did, and I brought on Ed Bartlett, a very good researcher that if you go to their website, it's called endtodv.org. It talks about the myths of VAWA, but he had some updated statistics. And we covered this extensively. And his newest statistics said last year, domestic violence happened to 2.7 million women versus 3.5 million men. Who's talking about that? Nobody. That was the updated statistic. Now, I guarantee you, if you go to get those statistics somewhere else, they're going to say something completely different. And then again, talking about the Harvard study, they do such a good study by such a respected university, right? Why would you delete that? There is a lot of money in this industry, guys. A lot of money. Think about who all has to be hired. How many people get funding for this crap? Usually you get questions every day. How is this happening? How is this happening in this state? Why are they doing this with family court? Why are they doing this with CPS? Why are they doing this with this? And I always say the same thing. Money and control. That's it. I guess I could give you more of an answer, but it all boils back down to money. That's what this whole industry is about. And they don't want you to expose it. They will do anything to keep it this way. Kevin Nash Dixon said, I was in a 10-year with my daughter's mom, verbally abused, physically abused, accused of abuse falsely, caused to be homeless and jail time. I have rebuilt myself, but it's hard and tough. Man, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. And the reality of that, imagine going through all this. I don't know, man. I don't know. That's how bad it can get. But you know what, dude? You dusted yourself off. You got in there and you rebuilt yourself. That sounds like a story that people needs to hear. I don't know if you wrote a book or if you've chronicled that, but a man that's rebuilt himself after going through something like that, people need to hear that story because there's many more like you. You know, I always have this like tugging at me anytime I'm going down the street or if I'm in another city. Man, it was bad in Baltimore. That was one of the worst cities I had ever seen. But you see these homeless people on the side of the streets, especially veterans, because veterans seem to get it worse than anybody because You was in the army. You did this. You was in war. You're a dangerous person. They use your service against you. But you see these homeless guys sitting there on the street and they got the signs. And my first thought every single time is, what led them there? What was their family structure like when they was growing up? Was their dad around? Was there divorce? Is it PTSD? But most people see a homeless person. I want to know that story. And I've even thought about doing a chapter or a segment on Dad Talk to where I go and find these people and ask. That can be a little dangerous at times. I've met some of these guys that are facing like mental issues. It is crazy. And I don't know how they're sitting on the streets like that and our government hasn't helped them. But there's some of them that have some stories and they've been beaten up so much and I'd love to hear it. And here's one right here. I'd love to hear that story, Kevin. I thank you for saying that. Alt Prop on YouTube said, remember how the audience gave a standing ovation to Will Smith when he acted out for his toxic wife? Yeah. I saw a video the other day where she went live on Instagram and put the camera on Will and said, Will, you got to tell everybody how good our family therapist did for us. And he's just sitting there like this. And he's like, social media is my bread and butter. You can't be doing this to me. And so he goes to walk away and she puts the camera. She's like, you did an amazing job with that. But obviously, we still need some help, pointing at him as he's walking away, mocking him. You watch that video and he was laughing. The guy was laughing. Looks over, sees the reaction. I'm here to protect you. He goes and does that. And now guess what? I've seen him downplaying what he did. He didn't have to do that for me. I didn't want him to do that. You go back to those videos and watch the smile on her face. I'm so proud of you. But now, guess what? I got what I needed. You look like the bad guy. I'm going to go back to my 23-year-old that I was having my entanglement with. And now people will take up for me. It's going to go good for me. Let's get some money out that divorce. But yeah, they did, man. I will also say though, again, one of the good things that I think happened with both of those situations are people are waking up. And unfortunately, it took two well-known people to go through it for people to finally start talking about it. At least they're talking about it. Sapper said, I lived with constant mental and physical abuse for the last 5 years of my marriage. Now her abuse has moved to the courts and mind games continue with me and the kids. Running Shoes said, Parks is allowing the Women's Abuse Center to get away with filing fake reports. Evil, dude, evil. Yeah. You guys remember the gentleman that I had on from Hawaii? His name is John Strimmel. He was another veteran that ex was hitting him, making him sleep on the floor. I think a lot of this was going on with the kid too. And because he was in service, he was really trying to be careful because he knew that if he reacted, what was going to be his fate? He went to 5 different domestic violence shelters that all told him, you're a man, you can't be here. Here's a man that was experiencing, went to 5 different places and he was turned away. Why? And if you file a discrimination suit, where's that going to go? There's just no empathy when it comes to your mental health or who you are as a person. We've gotten to the point where people are putting turds in beds. This is how ridiculous we are now, guys. Turds in the bed. Can any of you imagine walking in and seeing a log sitting there under that? I'm sorry. I know I'm making a little bit of fun. We got to have some fun with it. Because if anything shows crazy, good Lord have mercy. Oh my God. Running Shoes said, call to Santa, stop the abuse against men. You know what, dude? I agree with it. You guys need to call him. There's several things. He just passed a fatherhood bill. I think that was more a show than anything. It wasn't his bill. He just helped get it through. There is an equal shared parenting bill that's went all the way through the House and the Senate, and it's on his desk right now. I saw what he did with the domestic violence organization, and I've seen what he's done with several other people. Call him, tell him he's got your support and that you want him to get that bill through. He does need to hear from everybody, okay? Because I think they've had their hands on that for a while now, guys. Since last time we talked, National Parents Organization did a very good job. They got shared parenting passed in West Virginia. So we're adding another state to the list where fathers and mothers have equal rights upon divorce or breaking up. So there is some progress being there, but Florida would be a huge add to that list. Felix Martinez said, add to the struggle men face with parental alienation. I pray for men who have to deal with these issues. Yeah, man. I remember being in the thick of this, never experienced it, anything like it before. And before, I experienced it or when I was going through it, I never heard of parental alienation. Ever. And I couldn't make sense of it. I searched and I searched and I searched, and I finally found it and I started reading up on it. But I can tell you, if going back to that moment in time when I was going through that, how messed up my head was. The thoughts that were just going around. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't get my mind off of it. Life was living torture. And I know a lot of people are not feeling comfortable with therapists right now. And I understand. A lot of them are pieces of crap. Some of them can be just as crooked as the courts. But to find somebody that knew what was going on, for me, was the best thing that ever happened to me. I didn't get any relief the first or second time I went. But as I got the third and the fourth, and I started to get to process some more of those emotions, there's something with this narrative, with what we've been talking about over the past hour, with them looking at men as perpetrators, looking at them as deadbeats, that when you start going through this, even if you're doing everything that you can to try to be in your children's life, there is still, for some reason, a guilt that comes over you because you're not being able to see them. I am letting my child down because I'm not there. But dude, you're doing everything you can, but I'm still not there. And it just starts playing in your head. It is psychological and it is mental abuse. But having to learn how to process that and find some forgiveness for myself. A lot of people carry around that guilt rather than just forgiving themselves. You do what you can do. And if you are doing it and you're out there working it, you got to allow that to get off your mind, man. You can't sit there and just stew on this stuff all day long. Jason Bannister, if there's so many of us going through this, why can't nothing be done about it? Money. Money. The reality is, a lot of you guys that are going through this, if you want me to be honest with you, a lot of you guys that are going through this, you're having to pay that child support, you're having to pay those lawyer bills, you're at work. When men's organizations, which don't get the government grant funding, they're not getting the VAWA funding, try to organize something, try to show up. Most of the guys are at work, and you have like 10, 15 people show up. But it's understandable, okay? I understand. But I asked the same question, Jason. We went to 43 states last year, man. Every place we went, we said, Dad Talk Today is here. We want you to come in there and walk the Capitol with us. And there was a lot of advocates that did. We went in places, people we never even knew, knocked on that door. Hey, I want to talk to you about a problem. We made some good contacts. Was there lots of people that showed up? No. Again, when you hear from people, man, I'm at work. I'm so sorry. I can't show up. Again, we don't have that funding. What we need is full-time advocates that can work on this full-time and really hit it. You get on the other side of that, when you got to talk about funding and all this other stuff. Oh my God, dude. It's just, it's a mess. But we do need these men to step up. We do need these men to step up and become a part of it. Because guys, until we all come together and we do this, this is what you got. Unfortunately, right now, that's what we've got. Hopefully cases like that's going on with this right now is going to start to provide a little bit more attention to it. Kevin Nash said, unfortunately, the laws almost make it negligence on law enforcement if they don't take the man. Yes, it's an accountability thing. They got to be careful, because if they find out, oh, he was an abuser and you didn't take him in, there's going to be consequences. I just don't understand why, if it was her and you take him in and you find out later it really was her, is there no consequences? Shouldn't it go the same on both sides? No, it doesn't. Again, the narrative. Cindy, the other hot topic is child endangerment. Due to domestic violence, he gets charged, sent to prison due to her lies and behaviors. With a felony, he loses visitation for a year while on parole. Broke his heart because the kids are everything. It can be almost impossible trying to fight that off. I've talked to these guys that try to get stuff off their record. I've heard of people that have, again, pleaded guilty. Going back to John Mast. If somebody's saying we're going to give you a lesser sentence and we're going to take that felony, make it a misdemeanor or something like that. There's so many different challenges that these guys face. You know what I think should happen? Especially in cases like that with John, if he went to take evidence and you didn't allow that evidence inside a court, and then later on he's exonerated from it, now he's lost his life, whoever that judge was that didn't allow that evidence in there should be in jail. That's what I think. But you got judicial immunity. They can do what they want to do, right? Don't get me started, man. I'm sorry, guys. Jamie Stewart said, you're so right. I've tried for 18 years to be in my kid's life, and now my daughter is so judgment towards me because of her mom. That is junkie, and I'm not. But she has no clue what she has missed in my family. There's the other side of that with the parental alienation. Most people think, it's called parental, right? But there's so many other people that lose out. From grandma to granddad, aunts, uncles, siblings. How many of you heard it in that case where they'll say, oh, your family can come over, but you can't? Because they try to turn your family against you. I was just talking about to a father the other day. He's going through this, got a newborn. She went and told his family, oh, you guys can come and see him, but he's not. And they fell for it. They fell for it. How many situations, and you should have family. They should be the one thing you can count on, right? Recruiting, getting as many people against you, telling the story on social media, finding that sympathy, making you look like the bad guy. I'm sorry for that, man. Jamie said most women are in the office of domestic violence and men are screwed. That is true. You know that a lot of times in these cases, when domestic violence happens to men, they got people that make sure that never go on the record. Did you know that? It's part of VAWA too. Yeah. It's not showing me your whole comment, but I'm going to try to get to it. But Jason Vermender said, I'm scared what happened to John might happen to me. My sons and I have survived 6 false abuse allegations against me. I never hit my ex, but she assaulted me during the relationship. I want our custody exchanges to be through school daycare so I don't have to be anywhere near her. But she has taken the mental of abused wife and insists on exchanges at the police department. If someone was abused, they would try to avoid the person, as I do, and not insist on seeing them even with the police. I cut it off a little bit down there. One thing that needs to be said, and that we need to start educating people on, there is a lot of work that needs to be done to it first. And that's why I haven't been doing as many podcasts, because we're trying to figure this one out. The amount of people that are being killed, the amount of situations that are happening at these custody exchanges, something's got to be done. There's got to be some type of resources. There is over 800 custody exchange centers in the United States of America where you can show up, pick up your kid, drop off your kid with never coming in contact with the ex. How many of you guys knew that existed? I'm going to tell you, I've been doing this for 3 years. I knew there might be something kind of in that realm, but I never knew anything like that existed. Why not? They're funded by the Violence Against Women's Act. They're funded by VAWA. So it should be addressing that issue, right? How many of you men know about it? Let me ask you another part of this. If you did know about it and you saw that it was funded by Bell, or if you go and read the mission statement and it says it's there to protect mothers and children from the threat of domestic violence, how would you feel as a father going to use that service? We are getting into a realm, especially with these murders at custody exchanges and the violence at these custody exchanges, that we've never been before. I'm sure it was there in the past, but it seems to be getting worse and worse. That's something I am trying to work towards, and I would ask for your participation. If you go follow the John Mast Foundation on Facebook, one of the things that we're trying to do is find the research, because there's not much research out there when it comes to violence at custody exchanges, what's causing it, these custody exchange centers, would men feel safe using it? Did you know that it was funded by this? Did you know it existed? And we're going to be getting some of this research that we can take to lawmakers, that we can take to some of these custody exchange centers and say, look, we pulled all these guys right here. None of them knew about you. And you know what the other side of that is? They said they wouldn't feel safe using you if they knew that's where you was getting your funding. We need your help in getting those reports out, guys. I put something out a few days ago. They've got a Give, Send, Go. The family started a Give, Send, Go to get the money up to run these reports. They can be a little costly, but we need that research because nobody else is doing it. And if they're not going to do it, we are. And once that gets done, it will be made available to the public so that you can take it and share that conversation with other people. So please just make sure, if you do, when you get time after this show, go follow that page and keep up with that Give, Send, Go, because we need your help. I'm getting through these. Benjamin Crawley said, I was abused when I was little, from the age of 6 till I was 14. Lost both my little sister and little brother due to suicide, plus years of mental abuse from my ex. Because of it, I was diagnosed last year with PTSD. Felix said, let's have a men's empowerment conference to help and uplift one another. I hear you. Some of the best ones, that's kind of what we're doing now, right? But again, it goes back to that same thing that I talked about before. We've been there, we've done that. I've seen other organizations that have been there, they've done that. And it's got a lot to do with how many people show up. If you're going to do it, we need to get some people. There is one place, I forget the name of it. There was one thing, and I'll figure it out a little bit later on. But there was a conference that used to be held in like the 80s and 90s, where at one point in time they had, I think it was close to 2 million men that showed up in Washington, D.C. together to march for fatherhood. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine if something like that happened now? That would be amazing. You got a lot of elements that's going against that right now. You got to have the gas money to get there, the hotel and everything. And I don't know if you guys seen this economy. It's a little rough, but I would love to have one of those, man. I would love to. It's just a little hard to set up sometimes. Jamie Stewart said, that is so true about prosecutions. If you plead out and have public defender, they work for the state, then you are screwed. Cindy Slavin said, true again. Read one of those tales on Facebook. She booed. She was afraid of him. Yet she was the instigator of the whole situation. She just wants sympathy and keep telling the same story to make herself look like the victim. Totally ridiculous. Talking about Amber Heard again. Oh, man. I mean, even her body language. I don't think you got to be a prosecutor. You don't have to be a lawyer to be picking up what's going on there. I mean, dude, it is just so obvious. Gaz Olson, newest, said, I've been gaslighted for 10 years and no one cares to listen and wants to help me get better for myself and my children. And I'm also fighting to see my children in court with my abusers, the mother of my children. You don't want to worry about what other people are doing, but you've got to help yourself. And I don't mean that in a way. There's plenty of groups out here that will prop you up, and we know what that feels like. But that's one of those situations where you start feeling like nobody is there for you. I guarantee you there is people that will. Don't let that start messing with your mind. That's some of the thoughts that start getting in there. There is people. Get involved and start looking up some of these things. That's part of what we're trying to do. Like I said, with that foundation, there are several different grassroots organizations in every state in the United States of America where you can become involved and get there. And another thing that I would say, guys, and this is hard, okay? This is hard when I say this, but I want you to understand the importance of it. We've got to learn sometimes, especially in this battle, to get beyond our personal cases. Because nobody's going to change these laws. The system's not going to change by us going and saying, here is my story. And so many people think that. We represent millions. Millions. I think sometimes the last statistics I heard was like 20 to 25 million men that have experienced this in the country. So anyway, man, I hope everything starts to get better for you, brother. So finally, baseball season. Hadn't watched in a bit. My friend, you were out of character. Are you good to go? What is going on? I'm not out of character. This is the way I've always been. We are talking about a situation that needs awareness. But a lot of times this is what happens, guys, when I do. The other one, don't stop talking. People are listening. I guess everybody's agreeing. All right, Mia Lynn Overton said, I was going through this conflict with my ex as well, but when I remarried, seeing what I've seen my husband go through, the way his ex-wife treats him and their daughter, I've learned more getting to know other stepmoms, what so many of these men have gone through with women like this. It's convicted me. I've taught my little boys to be kind, chivalrous, little gentlemen, but need to instill in them the ability to discern these high conflict, manipulative, entitled girls. That is a group that I know Melissa Isaac has mentioned in the past that would be so strong for this is stepmoms. Because they're really the ones that kind of step in and see a lot of the BS going on and prop up these guys in situations that they had no skin in the game creating. And I'd love to see more of these stepmoms get involved. Thank you for sharing that comment. Mia said, she got another comment. Said, how can anyone watch the video in the Chad Reed case and think Chad posed any threat? That was not justified. That was murder. For anybody that hasn't seen that, if you look up the Chad Reed case on YouTube, I think it was even on Good Morning America. Here's the guy, went to go get his kid. Ex knew he was coming to get the kid. She sent him off somewhere else anyway. He shows up. He's mad. He's mad. Rightfully so. Boyfriend comes out on the porch, shoots him. Boyfriend, so far, has gotten away. Anyway, Charles said, when we talk about the responsible father registry, Chris's story should scream at the need to know about it. So for anybody that hasn't ever heard of Christopher Emmanuel, he was a father. He went through this. Ex left him. When his child was born, she tried to put the child up for an adoption. But because Chris had signed up for that responsible fatherhood registry, he was one of the very few fathers in this country that when that went to happen, he gained custody back of his child. And he was the one that kind of taught me about this responsible fatherhood registry. If you haven't seen it, look up Christopher Emmanuel. It's really good. Running Shoes US said, what was the website? I'm not too sure which one you're talking about. You might be talking about followthemoney.org when I was talking about where you can look up the donations and what was getting, who's getting. There's also the johnmassfoundation.org. I'm not too sure which one, man. I'm probably way behind on the comments. I know I'm flapping out the mouth quite a bit today, but it's good to talk to you guys. John Kemp said, I was a victim many times. The system ignores it. The courts and social services don't want to acknowledge abuse to men. My children are with their abusive mother, and I am left fighting the corrupt system, and my children are suffering. I'm going to try to make it. So Jason said, so should we all walk away from the family law system and let them go broke if we all come together and done? It would work, but we are weak. I understand that, and I've heard people say that for years. But remember, First thing that's going to happen, you walk away, you're going to lose your license, you're going to go to jail. Then once you get that on your record, it's going to destroy the rest of your life. This system is made to make sure you don't walk away from it. And so if millions of men did that at the same time, would it be effective? I don't know that I can tell you that, but I don't know how you're going to get them to do it either. I don't think that is the smartest thing. I understand the idea behind it, and I've heard it several times. I would be careful with that one. Alt Prop said Helen Pence invented the Duluth Model. She later admitted she made it up, but feminists still insist on police and courts using that. Hey, man, I appreciate you for bringing that up. Eugene Nelson said, I pray for all of us men. I love us, and we got to keep fighting to be fathers and supporting each other. Thanks for this podcast. Hey, thank you, Eugene. Todd Ashley said, that's exactly why she would do it. It's psycho, and unless you've witnessed it firsthand, it's hard to believe. That's it, man. Again, for somebody that's never been through any of what we're talking about right now, they look at it from the outside, and it seems so ridiculous, it seems so over the top that you just think it's a lie. That is the good part about this case going public with the turd on the bed in these recordings. They're getting to see how crazy some of this gets. All right, Chris Farrell said, the fatherless home is caused by buzzwords, scapegoating, gaslighting, power control, extortion, alienation, but these professional bad mental behavior words that are not placed with root cause of the fatherless home. This is what perpetrators of fathers hate while using their children to spread hate. They engage third parties to assist with these buzzwords. I have seen, I got a little heat for talking about this not long ago. I was talking about the word narcissist. You know, I used to talk about narcissism. I got some good friends that still talk about it. It's real. It is 100% real. But what you have seen is that become the buzzword. And I see these couples that are breaking up each other, is calling each other narcissists and worried about who was the narcissist, who was doing this. And it's like, okay, forget the terminology. This stuff is becoming such a buzzword that it's really taken away from the seriousness of what that is. But it's also, I think it's decreasing its effectiveness in people's, willing to look at it. I get in a whole conversation about that, but there is a lot of these buzzwords that are getting thrown around. I have to agree with you. I think make sure that you are focusing on the behaviors. That's the biggest thing. I don't care what it's labeled. What are the behaviors and what's going on? Tony Penn said, so many women try to make us men look like we're savages. You raise kids that aren't yours, treat the family like they are yours, and then when they are done with you, you're supposed to disconnect, not only from the family, but that also try to use your kid as a cheese piece. I've seen it. I've seen many of these guys come in and, treat the family like their own. And when that's over, they can't talk to any of them. They can't do anything because we're not together. It no longer exists. Yeah. Trying to get through these, man, guys. If some of you have been making comments and I skip over yours, I'm trying to get to some of the people that I have not talked to. C on YouTube said, for me, it cut the allegations in half because this was the only time I was around the ex. More allegations came, but I want even 10 miles of where she says I was, which I proved via a job camera. Miles said most of the money used to destroy families comes from the Social Security Trust Fund, which is an insurance program for federal employees. The feds created these problems intentionally. You're 100% correct. And Title 4D is actually under the Social Security Act, oddly enough. So, yeah, man, good point, brother. Mr. Bobby Burke, man, good to see you. It's all for our children. That's why we need to fight. Arb on YouTube said, went through the court more than 10 times to become a custodial parent due to abuse. Sucky part, I got struck down with chronic pain and stomach problems, which led to losing my job. Life got much harder. So here was several different stories that you've heard from fathers, all across the nation. Many of their stories have many of the same elements. I think the whole reason behind putting this out there was just to make sure that we're talking about this narrative, that we're keeping that conversation out there and making sure that these men are heard. It should not have taken a celebrity's case for this to finally start being talked about. It just shouldn't. But we're going to continue to cover this a little bit more, man. I am going to let you guys get out of here so you can enjoy your weekend. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please go do that with the John Mass Foundation. That's where a lot of the time is going on right now. We need your help to get these studies out because, again, guys, nobody's doing it. Nobody's doing it. And when you try to do the right thing, you're not getting all this government funding that all these other organizations that have made the system that way is. So in order to do this, it feels like David versus Goliath. You're always going up against that Goliath that tells you there's nothing that you can do. But I don't believe that. If I didn't believe that we could change the system, if I didn't believe that this narrative could be overturned, I would not be here. And I don't think you guys would either. Sometimes it feels like there is no hope. There is hope. You just got to hang on, get in there, and keep fighting, man. And I know that's easier said than done. This process will beat you up and make you feel like you just don't want to go on. I remember days that I just didn't even feel like getting out of the bed, man. And the only reason I did is because I knew I had those kids that I had to be a daddy to. And you know what? You still got to give them discipline and you still got to be a dad. And sometimes that's hard too when you're in the middle of this because you want to feel like, oh man, they've already been through so much. Those are some hard days. That psychological abuse and everything else, man, it tires you out. But you guys are strong and you can do this. And I thank you so much. When I was having that talk at that office, my thought was when I speak out, when I do the things that I do, all of you guys that commented in today with your situations of what you were going or what you're going through, those are the people that I'm talking for when I do this. The ones that might not even know this is going on. They need to be represented. And if I don't say anything right now, I'm turning my back on the very ones that have helped us create what we've got here. I'm not going to do that. And I would tell you not to either. Watch those narratives that are out there. This is a big one. It's finally getting some attention. It still hasn't got the attention that it needs yet, but it's at least getting some attention. We will be back next week. I've got several more shows coming up. I've got an exciting trip down to Florida with the Dad Talk Today team that people will find out about after it's done. But there are some good things in the works, guys. So say a little prayer for us. I'll do it for you, and I hope you have a good weekend. We'll see you next time. Hey, everybody. Eric Carroll here. Thank you for tuning in to another exciting episode of Dad Talk Today. While we fight for you, we would ask for you to please help fight for us. Like, subscribe to our channel, and ring that bell so you get notifications every time we go live. There's also Super Chats, patreon.com/dadtalktoday, and other ways you can support our channel. Thank you for being here, and we will see you next time.